Good evening, everyone. Caitlin, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me right now? Excellent, thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I would like to extend a warm welcome and thank you for joining us in our presentation today. My name is Tiffany Wood-Lysette, and I am a school social worker with the Safe Schools and Wellbeing portfolio of the Thames Valley District School Board. And this is my colleague who is also going to introduce herself now. Not quite our presenter, but my colleague is going to let you know who she is.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Caitlin Chow, and I am a teacher with the Thames Valley District School Board. And this year, I have the honor of being a part of the Safe Schools and Wellbeing portfolio as well.
So, thank you, Caitlin. So, we are really excited to be a part of this collaboration between local school boards and our community partner organizations to host these family well-being workshop presentations online throughout the year with varying topics and presenters. On our website, you can find the list of upcoming presentations, and we will provide more information about key contacts at the conclusion of today's presentation. Without further ado, of course, today we are thrilled to welcome our friend Kelsey Morris to discuss supporting our youth with healthy, intimate relationships and consent. So, just to give you a little bit of information about Kelsey, and I'm sure that she will give you more details about the work that she does. Kelsey is an advocate counselor at London Abused Women's Centre. She has been working in the social service sector for 6 years and has spent the last 2 years specializing in male violence against women. Kelsey is a strong feminist who uses her platform to advocate for social, political, and personal change. As a mother herself, Kelsey understands the importance of these conversations and the impact of early education and intervention. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome Kelsey.
Oh, I'm going to have
Just
to
your mic,
interrupt.
Kelsey, just
Yeah.
1 second. Yeah.
I
And
got too
Kelsey,
excited I didn't unmute myself. Hello, thank you for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here. So as Tiffany said, I am an advocate counselor at London Abused Women's Centre. Let me just double check here that I can control the slides. I can. Beautiful. Okay, so this is just what we're gonna be talking about tonight, friends. So I'm just gonna do a little introduction of the services that we offer at London Abused Women's Centre and what we do in the community. We are going to go over what consent is. We're really going to define it tonight. We're going to discuss other influences in our children's lives because I know as a parent, as much as I'd love to believe that I have the highest say and the highest influence for my sons, that's not the case. We're going to discuss non-consensual sharing of images in the age of social media. And I feel like everybody has a smartphone. This is a really important conversation to be having. Next, we're going to talk about the power and control wheel. That is a tool that we use every day here at the center. So we'll be discussing that. And then we're just going to discuss some relationship red flags and green flags. So at London Abused Women's Centre, we are a feminist agency. We provide counseling and advocacy to women and girls who are 12 years of age and older, who are currently or who have historically been subjected to intimate partner violence, sexual exploitation of any kind, human trafficking, or non-state torture. So that's what we do. Um, so I do want to just kind of unpack that feminist lens. Through a feminist lens, we believe that women are the experts in their own lives. So that means that we never judge a woman for a decision that she's made. We also never try to convince women to make certain decisions. We firmly believe that women are doing everything they can to keep themselves safe. Our role is to be an ally, an advocate, gather information if they require it to make informed choices. But yeah, that is where that feminist lens come in. So I just wanted to explain that. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, is define consent. So this is literally just an internet definition. So consent is a noun. It is very simply permission for something to happen or agreement to do something. Consent is voluntary. It is ongoing. It is enthusiastic, but most importantly, it can be revoked or withdrawn at any time. So consent, oftentimes is a topic that really only comes up when we're speaking about sexual activity, but there are so many other situations in which consent is practiced. So, for example, consent is discussed in my career. So, when I am speaking with women about confidentiality, I have to go over with them that I cannot share their information with anybody outside of our agency unless I have their written consent, right? Their permission to do so. So that's consent in my work. Um, you know, when we only discuss consent in terms of sex, I believe that we are missing so many opportunities to teach our children about consent. So consent happens in seemingly the most minuscule ways, right? All of these ways in which we are actively practicing consent in our day-to-day lives and we're not even thinking about it. So an example could be, when I went to the hairdresser and she asked me if I wanted bangs and I said yes, I was giving her consent to cut my hair in a certain way, right? I was giving her permission to do something with my body. So those are often those examples of consent that we overlook or that we don't really identify as consent. So anytime that we agree to participate in an activity, we are practicing consent. Anytime that we deny to participate in an activity, we are practicing consent. So the consent laws in Canada, the age of sexual consent in Canada is 16 years old. So there are what are called close in age exceptions to this. So individuals that are 12 and 13 years old, they can consent to sexual activity if the sexual partner is less than less than 2 years older than them. For 15 and 16-year-olds, they can consent if the sexual partner is less than 5 years older than them. So, for example, a 15-year-old could consent to sexual activity with a 19-year-old. But the important, regardless of age, no child can consent if the sexual partner is in a position of authority, trust, or a caregiving role. So examples of caregiving or authoritative roles can also include babysitter, right? That is an example of a caregiving role. So a 13-year-old could not consent to sexual activity with a 15-year-old babysitter. I do also just want to say, like, if at any point we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of this, but if at any point someone needs clarity or someone has a concern or a question about something that I've just said, like, please do speak up about that. I know sometimes when I'm watching presentations, I cannot wait until the end. I'll totally forget. So if something does come up and you do want to engage, please feel free to do so. Okay. Also, justice.ca, they when they're talking about age of consent, it includes all forms of sexual activity from kissing to touching, fondling to the act of sexual intercourse. So this is a big one. Who is influencing my children? And I fully recognize that I have a slide of just pop culture, right? And there's a reason that I've done that. But we're also going to discuss other influences of our children that our children are subjected to. But why did I dedicate an entire page to pop culture? Because of how impactful this has become to all of us. There are very few people in our society that are spared the influence of social media and or pop culture. So in 2017, Statistics Canada reported that children and youth aged 5 to 17 spent on average per day 3 hours on a device or a screen. So that was in 2017, right? We are now 6 years later. I would be willing to bet that that statistic of 3 hours per day has increased. I would absolutely be willing to bet that. It's just so accessible, right? So to put that into perspective, 3 hours per day is almost half of our children's school day, right? So that's a pretty significant chunk of time that our children are spending on the internet. So when 12 to 17-year-olds were asked what they were doing on screens for this 3 hours, they reported that they were watching TV, they were watching movies, they were playing video games, or scrolling social media. So I'm sure that most of you are aware, like we're going to jump into it. I'm sure most of you are aware of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial that happened last year. That was a very public, unfortunately, very public, but very personal, experience for both of them. But in 2020, Amber Heard actually won a lawsuit against Johnny Depp for allegations of domestic violence. So that happened in the United Kingdom. A judge, I do believe it was 12 counts of domestic violence that Johnny Depp was convicted of in the United Kingdom. So unfortunately, 2 years later, when that happened so it wasn't another allegation of domestic violence. So what Johnny Depp did last year is it was a defamation of character that he was alleging Amber Heard of because she had written an op-ed about domestic violence and domestic violence survivors. So this became very public to the point where it was actually live streamed on the internet. And if we think just for a second about one of our most personal, intimate moments where we are at our most vulnerable, being live streamed on the internet to millions of people, I can imagine how detrimental that was to Amber and how much that impacted her. So he won. He won last year. And if we look at the major difference in the court cases between America and between the United Kingdom, the court case just took place in front of a judge. There was no jury. There was no live streaming it on YouTube. That didn't happen. In America last year, the court case took place in front of a judge and a jury, and it was live streamed. So, it seems that the court of public opinion weighed heavily and heavily influenced the outcome of that. So then we have Kim Kardashian and Kanye West. So in 2021, in February, actually, so 2 years ago, February of 2021, Kim Kardashian applied for a separation from Kanye West, and she just cited, irreconcilable differences. Then we watched in real time as Kanye West engaged in numerous, accounts, numerous instances of what we classify as post-separation abuse. So post-separation abuse is something that happens after the survivor has left the abuser. This is, when I think of that kind of victim blaming narrative that sometimes happens in our society of, well, why doesn't the woman just leave? Because we know that abuse and violence doesn't end just because a woman leaves the relationship. So Kanye West bought a house right across from Kim Kardashian after they separated. He was utilizing social media as a way, so that purchasing of the home right across from her, right? I would consider that an act of intimidation. Then we watched him on social media. He was using tons of social media, his personal accounts, but then also interviews, things like that, and his music to threaten her then partner, Pete Davidson. Why am I bringing this up? That's a great question. I'd love to tell you. So I'm bringing this up because our children had access to that information. Our children watched it. Andrew Tate, he is the person on the bottom. I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with him. Andrew Tate, for several years, the past few years, has become quite infamous for spouting his very toxic masculinity rhetoric and ideals to the world of what it means to be a man that often include a lot of violence. Horrendous things. There have been recordings released of Andrew Tate where he is, which are available on the internet, recordings of Andrew Tate talking about how he raped a woman, how he sexually assaulted her, and how he strangled her. So that information, right, is available to our children. Our children can just Google things like that. In regards to Kim Kardashian and Amber Heard, memes were made out of these women. Hashtags were made out of these women. So there was a hashtag, don't be an Amber. Anytime that, a woman stood up for herself or tried to argue something, it was don't be an Amber. There have been memes made about Kim Kardashian. So our children have access to that kind of content on the internet, right? On social media, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, all of those kinds of vessels in which we're getting that information, right? We're getting that content, we're absorbing it. So when we talk about, the hashtags and the memes, it reinforces that misogynistic attitude towards women. So the fact that our children have access to that, so they're not only hearing it, but some of our children are also engaging in it, right? They're telling their female peers or their female classmates, don't be an Amber. So this discourse has a very strong influence on the beliefs and the attitudes that our children are holding. So it's really important that we, as parents and caregivers, educate ourselves on these topics. And this is what I would argue one of those times it is important to stay relevant, because we need to be able to challenge things that our children are saying. We need to be able to offer a different lens and really challenge our kids to, well, think critically about that, right? Like, I majored in sociology. And so one of the biggest things that I ask myself when something happens is who benefits and who suffers. So if we look at the discourse around, women on the internet, who benefits from that? The men are benefiting from that, and women are suffering. Our children are also influenced by peers, right? Of course they are. Their peers, their friends, or their classmates may be introducing them to new ideas or information that they have learned. So this might be, startling, but I think it's important that you hear it and you're aware of this as a parent or caregiver. The average age that a child first views pornography is actually 11 years old. We know that pornography is not a realistic representation of sex or sexual activity. Unfortunately, right, the internet is full of a lot of misogynistic, content, violence against women. If we look at the porn industry, it's rooted in violence and patriarchy, right? There are fetishes, there are rape fantasies, there are things like that that are available on, porn streaming websites. So our children have access to that. It's natural for children to talk about what they have seen or what they've learned, right? And oftentimes when the topic is sexual in nature, they're less likely to come to their parents. They're less likely to come to us to talk about what they've just seen. They're more likely to talk to, Bobby, who sits beside them in math class, about what they just saw. So it's really important that we have that information as well as parents, right? To understand, okay, if my child's 11 or if my child's 13 or if my child's 15, what kind of content are they absorbing and what are they learning? Just going to go to the next one. While we're on the topic of social media, I really want to discuss non-consensual sharing of sexual or intimate images. So in 2014, the Canadian government enacted the Protecting Canadians from Online Crime Act. So it's Criminal Code Section 163 that says it is illegal to share intimate images of someone under the age of 18 without their consent. It is considered child pornography. So my son is in grade 8, so that's 13, 14 years old, right? And he has shared with me that females in his class are sending intimate photos to people. So it's not just happening to adults, right? It's not just teenagers or kids in high school that are doing it. This is also something that we're seeing among students in public schools. So Criminal Code Section 162 also says it is illegal to share intimate images, videos of anyone 18 and over without their consent, right? So just the bottom line, if you receive an intimate image of somebody, do not share it. It is illegal. It is, and depending on the age, it's child pornography, right? Unless you have permission from that person who's over 18 years old to share the image, do not share it. This is an interesting statistic, and this is where I would usually ask for you all to raise your hands, and so that way I can get a little survey, but I can't see any of you. So I'm just going to ask rhetorically, and you can kind of think about it, mull it over for a second in your head. So if we are talking about educating our youth about what the laws are in Canada surrounding the non-consensual sharing of sexual and intimate images, right? So what is the law? And therefore, if it's a law and you do it anyways, right, there are going to be repercussions, there are going to be consequences. Do you think that education at school about sharing sex, about, sharing sexual intimate images, do you think that it has any kind of impact on whether or not a child or youth will do it? So I'm going to give you the answer is no. So there's overwhelming evidence that just tells us it does not matter if we teach our children about what the law is. That has no impact or really no influence on whether or not they're going to receive a sexual image and then send it to their best friend, which is pretty unfortunate, right? That's pretty unfortunate to hear, pretty disheartening. So knowing that sharing a sext of someone without their permission is a crime generally does not have a significant impact on whether or not that child or youth will share it. Okay, so this is called the power and control wheel. So like I said, the power and control wheel is something that we use very regularly here at London Abused Women's Centre. I did also share this with Caitlin and Tiffany, so it will be available on the website after. I recognize that the font is quite small. So I'm going to go over some things just to give you an idea of what it is. But if you do want to have this, for your own information, you can Google it, or you can go to the TVDSB website and it will be available there. So the power and control wheel, it was created about 40 years ago in Duluth, Minnesota. This is a really important resource that we have because this was actually created by women with lived experience. So this was the first time that women got to define for themselves what abuse was. So it wasn't a police officer telling them what abuse was. It wasn't their friends or family telling them what abuse was. It wasn't a judge or a lawyer, right? They got to say, this is what I'm being subjected to, and this is abuse. So we still use this 40 years later. This has been adapted to fit, several different, several different varieties of power and control, I guess I could say. So there is a human trafficking power and control wheel. There is a non-state torture power and control wheel, but there's also an equality wheel. So that's also, I did give that also to Caitlin and Tiffany, so they'll be able to post that. So the equality wheel is, what is a good, healthy relationship, right? What does that look like? So in terms of the power and control wheel we're going to talk about today, there are 8 tactics of power and control that are listed here. So I'm just going to go over them a little briefly and give examples just to give you an idea of what it is. So one of the tactics is using coercion and threats. So that could be threatening to harm the woman, threatening to take children away, threatening to, expose the woman or man, right, as lesbian or as part of the LGBTQ community, threatening to steal, things like that, any kind of threat or intimidation, punching holes in the wall, throwing things at a person, breaking a person's belongings, right? Those are all tactics of, examples of coercion and threats or threats and intimidation. There is emotional abuse. So emotional abuse includes name calling, putting the person down, gaslighting. So for those of you who aren't familiar with gaslighting and what that is, gaslighting is quite literally denying the other person of their own reality. Gaslighting is so detrimental to our mental and emotional health. I consider gaslighting like a psychological warfare. So that could sound like, the abuser saying, that never happened. I didn't do that, right? Like you're making that up. No, do you remember I said that to you? I said that like 6 months ago. You're just, you just don't remember, right? So that's gaslighting when the woman is like, oh my God, like I swear that happened. Like, and then but then they start to question themselves. Did that happen? Maybe I am making this up, right? Like he seems very confident in that this never happened. So maybe I am the crazy one, right? That's also what we call that crazy making behavior. Using isolation is another tactic of power and control. So isolation could look like, not allowing somebody to talk to certain family or certain friends, going through your partner's phone, right? And looking at their messages or asking, hey, who's this? Who's this person? Why do you have this phone number? Monitoring any kind of like social media or text messages. So like put your phone on speaker. I want to hear what the conversation is, right? That's isolation. It's like I don't even have privacy now. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. So those three tactics typically go hand in hand, right? That's why they're all kind of listed together. So minimizing is minimizing the abuse. It wasn't that bad. I didn't even hit you that hard. No, when I called you that name, I was just joking. Like you're blowing this out of proportion, right? So minimizing that. Denying it, blatantly saying that it did not happen. I am not abusing you, right? Or sometimes it's blaming. So blaming can kind of come in two forms. So what I've heard from women, right, is blaming can be either, well, if you would have kept the house cleaner, I wouldn't have had to do X, Y, and Z, right? So if you do X, Y, and Z, then maybe the abuse won't happen. And that's when we start to internalize it, right? Like, oh my God, this is my fault. Another way that blame can take place is blaming the other partner, saying that they're abusive, right? Kind of turning the table, saying, no, you're the one that yells at me. You're the one that calls me names, right? So that is that tactic. Using the children is another tactic. So when we talk about using the children, that could be threatening to take the children away, like threatening to get custody of the children, putting the mother down in front of the children, right? Talking bad about her, threatening to call CAS on the mother, saying you're a bad mom, I'm going to call CAS, get the kids taken away, right? So those are examples of using the children. Then we've got, so this power and control wheel says using male privilege. It's actually been adapted and changed to using social status. So using social status could be anything from the male privilege, right? So that could look like, well, I'm the man, so I go out and I work, so you can't have a job. You have to stay home and you have to cook and you have to clean and you have to do laundry, right? You have to take care of the kids. You have to fulfill all of those domestic duties because I'm the man and you're the woman, right? And so that's a power dynamic right there. Using social status could also include things like if the abuser has any kind of social status in the community, right? So a job that holds a lot of social status, or it could also be, the opposite end of that spectrum. If the individual is involved in any kind of gang activity, do they have status in a certain gang and they're using that as a tactic of power and control? Then we've got using economic abuse. So economic abuse is anything to do with finances. So it could be stealing money from somebody, putting the person in debt, whether that be through loan sharks, things like that, or street debt. Economic abuse is also that, well, you can't work, right? You're not allowed to have a job. Okay, so then the woman doesn't have any kind of economic freedom or independence. She's dependent on the man to ensure that her basic needs are met and that her children's basic needs are met. So that's economic abuse. The reason that I wanted to go through this power and control wheel is I recognize that, so I work day to day with women and girls, but primarily women, right? And so I am speaking of a place of, bringing those women's stories with me to this presentation. But it's important that we can also listen to our kids, right? Because if I think of, a teenager dating and they always have to be on FaceTime with their partner, right? Why do you always, you just go home from school. So you get home from school, then you have to call your partner and be on FaceTime, and then you have to do that until you go to bed, right? That's not normal. That's so not normal. Or if, if my son isn't allowed to hang out with certain people, right? Does he have to end his relationships with his female friends because, his partner's telling him to, right? Or vice versa. So we can see these in our children's experiences too, and in their relationships. If we know it, right, we can identify it, we can spot it, we can support our children. Okay, so relationship green flags. You know what? Actually, I'm going to do relationship red flags first because we just talked about the power and control wheel. So relationship red flags can include blaming others and always making excuses, accusing you of cheating. So this is a really common one. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to go back to the power and control wheel. This power and control wheel also does not have sexual violence in it. So sexual violence, of course, is any kind of, sexual abuse is any kind of sexual violence, right? But sexual violence is also constantly accusing you of cheating, right? That's emotional, and that's part of that sexual violence as well. Sexual violence is your partner cheating on you. That's a tactic of sexual abuse, because if your partner's cheating on you, they're going outside of that, loyalty to you. They're also possibly exposing you to different STIs or different infections, things like that. So that's also, oftentimes people don't consider cheating sexual abuse, but it absolutely is. Okay, let's go back to relationship red flags. Guilt trips. It's always making you feel bad for things. Like, that's not normal. Coming on too strong in the beginning. So this is what we consider love bombing. So it's where, you're thinking this is too good to be true because it's probably too good to be true. Absolutely. If they are just, constantly buying you things, constantly, taking you on trips sort of places, like just coming on so strong, or like within a week, I love you. You barely know me. It's been a week, right? Like those are examples of love bombing. It's already creating that, it's intentional, right? It's creating that, forcing that emotional bond way too quickly. Lies to you or guilt trips you. So lying, obviously a huge red flag. Does not respect your friendships, becomes jealous or possessive, wants to know where you are and what you're doing, right? So if you have to give proof of where you are, I had a client that used to have to send a picture, so it could be like, send me a picture of your left foot, like prove to me you're at your mom's, right? Send me a picture of, like of your face with your eye blinking, whatever, right? Prove to me that you're there. So that's not normal. Does not respect your boundaries. So we've all got, our own personal boundaries. Like, I don't like this, or I won't tolerate this, or please don't do this to me. If they don't respect that, if they do those acts anyways, right? If they treat you or they say those things, that's not respecting your boundaries, and that's not okay. If you have a lack of privacy, so we go back to, right, checking the person's phone constantly, always monitoring who they're speaking to, who they're calling, what the phone calls are, right? Listening in on those kinds of conversations. Forcing you to do things you don't want to do. A huge red flag, and that's also not respecting your boundaries, right? It's also putting you in a position where you could be either, ethically, morally, physically uncomfortable, right? Anything like that that's going against who you are and what you want to do. So that is a red flag. We are going to end this with some positives. Relationship green flags, things to look for in a relationship, things that are, they're the green flag, like green light, go, like this is okay. It's okay to proceed. So respects your privacy. Agree on ground rules for conflict. This is a really big one in terms of relationships, right? Because oftentimes conflict, we will all, in every kind of interpersonal relationship we have, there's going to be conflict. So, and we all have our own ways of dealing with conflict. So can you and your partner agree on how you're going to handle conflict together? Also, will you still respect me when you're upset with me? Will you respect me when adversity comes our way? and you want to have a conversation with me, you want to voice your concerns, are you going to be respectful when you do so? Sharing responsibility and roles. So the biggest one that comes to mind is like household duties, right? So in a patriarchal society, oftentimes women are playing double duty, right? They've got that double work. So they go to their 9 to 5 and then they come home and they take care of the kids and they cook dinner and they clean up from dinner and they do the laundry. They make sure that the kids have a tub. Then they get the kids to bed. They make sure everybody's brushed their teeth and they pack the lunches for tomorrow. That's double duty. She doesn't get to come home from work and sit on the couch and, just relax and watch a show. She's got to fulfill all those domestic roles too. So is your partner sharing the responsibility and the roles? Do you have healthy intimacy? That's boundaries as well, right? So we all have, and that's consent. So if I say, I don't want to do that, are you going to respect me? Are you going to try to coerce me or convince me to do it, right? Coercion does not equal consent. If you have to convince somebody to have sex with you or engage in a sexual act with you, that is not consent. Respects women. That's a very big one. How do you talk about women? How do you talk about women in the media? How do you talk about your mom? How do you talk about that server that just brought you the wrong drink, right? What are you calling her names? Are you putting her down? Are you saying, oh, well, that's okay. She'll get me a new drink, right? How are you talking about women? Admit your mistakes. So that's self-accountability, right? Being able to say, oh, I was wrong, which means I'm going to change that behavior. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Mutual respect. That's pretty self-explanatory. Supportive of personal growth, not threatened by it. So can I go out and advance, whether it be my career, advance my education? Can I go out and advance my social network? Or are you putting me down for that? That's a really big one. Accepts you for who you are. Can you be your authentic self? And can you be respected as your authentic self in this relationship? And lastly, has tools for healthy conflict and actively uses them. So I don't want to hear about how you do it. I want to see how you do it. When adversity comes our way, when we're in the middle of a conversation about something we don't agree on, I want to see those tools for healthy conflict and communication. I should note as well, the slides for relationship green flags and red flags and the resource that's going to be posted on the TVDSB website, they're not, this isn't the be all end all, right? The list goes on. Also, when we talk about things like relationship green flags or red flags, these ones are, I would argue, maybe pretty universal, but there are going to be things that I might think are a red flag that my best friend's like, oh, that doesn't really bother me, right? So it's also individual to ourselves and what our own needs and uniqueness are. Okay, so that is it. That is it for my presentation. If you have any questions or any concerns, I've got the phone number up here. Again, I'm from London Abuse Women's Center. We're on Google. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are on, what's that other one with the bird? Twitter. We are on Twitter. The phone number here if you need to call, or our email is info@lawc.on.ca. If you have any questions or concerns, those are ways that you can contact us. Is it Q&A time now?
It is.
You
And
bet it is.
at this point in time, I don't have anybody who's used the Q&A function, so I'm hopeful that people can at least see it, even if they chose not to use it. That's something we're still kind of working on in terms of our technical side. That said, if there's anybody who would like to turn on their mic and ask a question, we welcome you to do so. I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment while we do that. Just so I can see everybody's little icon to see if anybody does choose to unmute themselves. And thank
Ooh,
you so much, Kelsey.
oh, my pleasure. I'm very happy to be here. I also do just want to preface this Q&A by saying that if you have a question about something that is personal or specific to your life, right, or your dependents, I will be answering in generalizations, right? So I ask all the questions. I'm a why, what, where, like love to have context to be able to give the best answer that I can, but we really don't have the space for that in this platform. So I absolutely want your questions, 100%. Please do engage, but I just want that understanding that I'll be replying in a generalized way.
I might get us started, Kelsey. I'm wondering, you gave us tons of good information and kind of about the general views of relationships, and you hinted a little bit about the influence of social media specific to our youth. I'm just thinking and wondering about what would you recommend or suggest to parents and caregivers if they do notice some of these red flags in their children or in their behavior or in their relationships?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So I could go off in so many directions here, so I'll try not to be squirrely and give, a coherent answer. So there could be the covert signs, right? So when we talk about covert and overt, covert is where it's obvious, right? Like you cannot deny that this is happening. But there's also a lot of things that are happening overtly, which we can either question as like, oh, was that what that meant? Or, we can kind of justify or bypass those microaggressions, right? So if something is happening covertly, that means that it's obvious and we're saying, okay, we need to intervene here as parents. There are several really fantastic resources in our city. So Blood and Abuse Women's Center, right? We serve women and girls, women identified. So if your child is a female or female identified, feel free to reach out to us for supports. We can do one-on-one counseling with your child. We also have an urgent support program. So it's every Monday to Friday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. If even just as a caregiver, you want to ask questions, right? Or you think, okay, I've seen my child do this, but I'm really not sure on what to do next. Calling and being able to give those specifics, right? That I said, unfortunately, we can't do here, but give those specifics to an advocate counselor, and they would be able to really guide you into what next steps you could take or what resources there are available. Um, always doing our best as parents to have that open door policy. And I know that that sounds really lame, but hear me out. We need our children to know that they can come to us, even if it's something that we think is so minuscule or so silly, right? It's something to our children. And with that open door policy, I'm going to challenge parents to be as judgment-free as possible. So just last year, there was a 15-year-old boy in, was it Ontario? Or I think it was Ontario, in Windsor, 15-year-old boy that committed suicide because he had shared an intimate image online. And the individual who received that image started to blackmail and extort him. So from the time and this is how quickly it can happen, parents. From the time that he sent the image to the time that he committed suicide was less than 12 hours, right? The amount of shame that that child probably felt made him feel like he couldn't go anywhere, that he couldn't get support. So I can tell you, like personally, I have a 13-year-old son, and I have already told him several times, I know that you're online. I check his phone. He's 13, so he gets a little bit of privacy, but I do check it. And I've told him, if you send a photo and somebody starts threatening you, you can always come to me. Like, just even if your kids have not come to concern, even if your kids have not even displayed signs, right? Opening that conversation, like, get it started. There's absolutely no harm in that, because then your children know, right? You can come to me and I'm going to help you. Like, I love you, and it's not your fault, right? We are not going to blame the victim. So absolutely, the open door policy, judgment free as possible, and initiate conversations with our kids, even if our kids, aren't initiating or aren't kind of showing any signs to us. We can do that, right? We can have the hard conversations.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. I have a question from a participant that says, what age would you recommend speaking to your child about the content that you presented tonight? And they also said, great presentation, by the way.
Oh, thank you. What age? So I think that there are different ages that can be that can utilize different pieces of the presentation, right? So having conversations with children about consent, right? We can start that so early. Like I started doing that with I have two boys, and so needless to say, they wrestled a lot, right? So I started introducing that when my youngest would have been 3 or 4, and my oldest would have been about, I'm trying to do math here. Social workers don't do math. 5 or 6. So that's the age that they were. And so when they were wrestling, if one of them wanted to stop, right? If I heard like, no, I don't want to anymore, I would say, oh, he doesn't give you consent anymore, right? That consent's all done. So it means you have to stop. Oh, well, I don't want to. Like he said that he wanted to play. That's okay. He's allowed to change his mind, right? So he's allowed to take that away. So you had his consent, but you don't have it anymore, and that's okay. So find something else to do, right? So consent, I believe that we can start so early, right? Because like I said, it's even those minuscule day-to-day activities or things that we're engaging in that we are actively practicing consent. A big one that I think about too is hugging aunts, uncles, grandparents, hugging and kissing them goodbye, right? So are we allowing our children to practice that autonomy and to say, no, I don't want to. Like, okay, pound it instead, right? High five, whatever. Oh, you don't want to do that? That's cool. I love you. I'll see you, I'll see you next week for dinner, right? So are we allowing our children that autonomy and that freedom to practice consent, right? Or are we forcing it? And so, you know what? I did write something down here. Okay, yes, this is important, right? Because when this may seem really silly, even taking a picture of a child, right? And if you've got Facebook or Instagram, whatever, and you want to post that picture on the internet, do you want to ask your child consent before you do that? Right? Because that's their image. So do you want to say, hey, I got this really cute picture of us. Are you cool if I share it on my Facebook? And they can say yes or no. So when our children can have that freedom, right, to learn consent and what that means for them and be able to practice that, I think, when they get older, the more aware of it they're going to be in their relationships and with other people. So, okay. It's going to be really difficult. This is what I want to say. It's going to be really difficult for us as parents to expect our children when they're older to practice consent and respect consent if we never gave them the opportunity to do that, right? So consent, that's a long-winded answer, but consent, any age, you can just start exploring that in different pieces. In terms of things like, I think about the average age of a child watching porn being 11, right? The average age of a child being trafficked is 13 years old, right? So these things are happening really early. So I would say, like, I've already had a conversation with my son about trafficking. He's 13. This is the average age it's happening, right? So understanding at what point is this happening. And also, I do also want to say your parent, every child is different too, and every child's capacity to understand is different. So you, at the end of the day, are the parent, and you do get to make that decision. But kudos to you, right, for coming to this presentation to learn more about it, to be able to better support your child. I hope that answered your question.
We certainly got lots of answers, so thank you, Kelsey. I have one other person who's asked a question in the chat, but I also noticed that a participant, Jennifer, has got their hand up. So I'm going to ask Jennifer, if you want to turn off your mic there, you're welcome to ask your question.
Do we have that control for the participants? Or do
They can currently unmute themselves. I can't. if somebody gets out of hand, I can always mute them, but I can't unmute them, unfortunately. So I'm going to see, Jennifer, the floor is open to you. Should you be able to get your mic to work? We, really appreciate everybody's patience with technology. And then while we're seeing about that, we had another question in the Q&A. Oh, we actually have two. So I will give you kind of maybe a hope for like a 3-minute per answer, Kels, just to keep us on time.
I'll try my best.
One of the
I'm a
first
rambler.
questions says, Kelsey, do you have any suggestions on how to engage in a conversation with a child, or like with my child, if I have concerns about their behavior, like sharing nude photos of themselves online, that doesn't shut them down?
That's a really good question. Especially because, in our society, sex is not an open conversation for a lot of us, right? If you do have concerns, so this is where I want to ask questions, right? So I'm going to give the general answer. If you do have concerns, your tone, right? Bringing up the conversation of, hey, I love you so much and I care about you so much and I want you to be safe. And I have this feeling, right? Or I've seen whatever it is. I'm not sure if you have a feeling or if you've seen photos. But whatever that, parental fifth, sixth sense is, right? And I just want to talk to you about that because I want to make sure that you're being really safe. And I know that sometimes when we do things like that, right? Like, is there something you need from me? Or is there something that we need to talk about? Or do you want to talk to somebody? Because the other thing is too, sometimes a lot of the times, like I said, right, our kids don't necessarily want to talk to us about sex or nude images, but they may be willing to talk to somebody else. They may be willing to talk to a counselor, or to a school social worker, right? So, and even if you open up that conversation, this is really important. You can open the conversation and they might shut you down or shut you out, right? That is okay because you've opened the conversation. Do not get angry or upset with your child, right? If they shut you down or if they just like go completely red and kind of stare off and they don't make eye contact, because it just means they're not comfortable, right? Reading their body language. Don't force a conversation that they're not ready to have, but opening up that conversation and say, okay, I want to check in with you about this maybe in a couple days, right? I'm going to give you a couple days to kind of mull it over, but I just want you to know that I'm not done having this conversation because I really, right, bring it back to I really care about you and I really love you and I want you to be safe. So if we can have this conversation, maybe, right, schedule a time so that way they can expect it. So, hey, Wednesday at 7, we're going to have this conversation. And I'm really hoping that maybe you can, talk to me about it a bit. And offer the alternative. If you don't want to talk to me, we can make some calls and see if there is somebody that you do want to talk to.
Thank you for that. All right, our next question, and Jennifer's just figuring out how to be able to. She's not able to unmute her mic. I'm going to go to one more from the chat, and then Bonnie, I noticed your hand is up as well, so thank you for that. Another question came in saying, "What age do you think a child is mature enough to date? I realize it varies from child to child based on maturity, but what do professionals like yourself suggest?"
Oh, that's a really hard one. That's super hard. And I honestly am not comfortable giving an age because, like you said, right, every child varies age to age. The other thing is too, our interpersonal romantic relationships, they also vary age to age, right? So, you know, my son came home when he was in grade 1 and he said, I have a girlfriend. Perfect. What does that look like? We play at recess together, right? Okay, beautiful. I'm very happy for you, right? So, Ah, I'm very hesitant to answer that question. I think
That's okay.
supporting, but I think it's important to support our kids in, okay, perfect. What does that look like for you? Right? Ask the question and say, oh yeah, well, do you feel respected? Do you feel, do they like you for who you are? Can you be yourself? Right? That's what's important. So really um, highlighting age appropriate healthy red flags. What an oxymoron. Healthy green flags that we want to see in relationships because we are social creatures and we want to connect with people, right? That it's in our biology to connect. And so I think it's a natural thing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelsey. I know we're putting you on the spot with some of these.
Your
Bonnie,
situation fits our mandate. Absolutely. I always recommend, like, if you're unsure, just call. just call and see if we can be of a support to you and your family.
Kelsey, since the moment we met you, we have felt your genuine love and authenticity. You are so approachable, and we are so, my heart is just warm to know that you're working in our community.
Oh, thank
Your
you.
thoughtful responses to all of our audience questions are so welcome. And the content and information, I mean, not everybody can talk to, two nodding heads for an entire hour. So we really, really appreciate you joining us and hosting this talk and being, thoughtful about your responses. The one thing I would also add is so many times as a school social worker, I interface with students who are terrified to get in trouble. And so, if we can just remind them in our caring and loving, open responses that your safety is so much more important than, getting you in trouble right now. And if this has happened and images are being shared, then I'm not focused on consequencing you for that. I'm focused on your safety and your well-being, and that's important. So, if as a parent you can authentically express that, I think that can really help our young people as well. So, Kelsey, we want to finish up tonight by saying thank you so, so much for your presentation.
It's my pleasure.
And loved seeing you host some of those important things that are showing up in media that our children have access to, and really highlighting that if we can access those as well and get ahead of those, then we're informed when we talk to our children about what they might be seeing on the internet or what they might be accessing. So thank you for that as well. We want to remind the audience of the contact information that you can see on the slide, not only for Kelsey, but also in connecting with those of us who are staff with the Thames Valley Board, and also remembering that we host these for the local boards in the area. And so whether you're a public school parent or a separate board parent or even French language parent, we are here for you to be able to interact and support you as a conduit of contact and communication. And if anyone reaches out to us, again, we have these resources from Kelsey that we will post on our site and accessible for you in the coming days. This was a recorded presentation, so it will be available for viewing into the future. We might have to edit it a little bit for time, and so once Kelsey previews and approves with her consent the posting of the recording.
There you go. You got it.
Boom, got that one. And so then it will be posted on our website for a period of time. Before folks go for the evening, we just want to, again, highlight our website here and ask if you have even a couple of minutes to provide us with some feedback through our website about this presentation. It just helps us be able to partner with our caregivers in the community. So again, on our website, there is a information about past and future workshops, and there's many that are coming up. There is the feedback form that we're asking if you could please complete for us. There's also a suggestion box for future topics or any community partners that you think might be interested in joining our growing team of community partners in providing information to caregivers. And even at the top of the site, you'll find the link to sign up for our mailing list. So many of you would already have that, but again, that's something you can share widely, and we really just encourage caregivers to sign up for that so that it can keep you up to date on all the things that we offer from this series, but also that our partner organizations like London Abused Women's Centre offers. And the last thing, again, Kelsey, thank you. Thank you so much. And we want to wish you and everyone else on the call this evening, and anyone who might watch in the future in the recording, well on your daily journey. And we really hope you join us again in the future for upcoming workshops. Take care and have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Take care, everyone.
Take care.